7:10, and you are watching BBC Breakfast.
Yes, let's move on now. Analysis obtained by BBC News has revealed a dramatic rise in the number of newborn babies taken into care in England.
According to researchers from Lancaster University, 800 newborns were subject to care proceedings at birth or soon after. 5 years later, that figure had risen to more than 2,000.
Joining us now in the studio is Sophie Humphreys, a former social worker in Hackney, and Karen Broadhurst from Lancaster University. Sophie, you run a charity now, Pause, which works with women who've had multiple babies removed in those circumstances. Do your experiences correspond with what these statistics suggest?
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is really important research, because what it does is it illustrates what we're seeing on the ground, which is that there is repeat removals and the need for this cycle to be broken of the same woman having child after child removed each year.
And if you were to outline for us any kind of pattern, I know you say there's a repeat, who are the repeat, these mothers who are having children and then having them taken away? Who are these people?
Well, I mean, we're working with over 200 women now across 7 sites for a funded programme through the DFE, where they've had over 700 babies removed between them. When you look at the women, I mean, obviously every case is different, but you're seeing is people who've had very complex childhoods. They are often been in care themselves. They may well be involved in, actually, majority involved in domestic violent relationships. Have also got drug and alcohol and substance misuse issues. And you can see they haven't had much focus on them and their needs. And what's really important is that need to focus on them at the point when that child is removed to fill that gap.
OK, Karen, it's a tough subject to talk about, because just let's be clear what we mean by, or you mean at least, by repeat removals. This is a mother who has a child taken away, and that she then has another child and it's taken away. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, exactly. So what we've been doing at Lancaster is trying to establish the scale of this problem. So we've been trying to work out how many women, or what's the chance of a woman coming back to court who's had a child removed before. So our new data, as well as what is reported on the TV, is also shows that 1 in 3 young women have got a good chance of coming back to court having had a child removed before. And as the new data shows, we're also seeing a rising number of infants removed at birth. And these are the women who are most likely to have a child removed if they've been to the court before.
Now, when you look through the statistics, what's very apparent is that the huge rise in numbers going back to 2007 to 2014. It has risen so much. Now, 2 things can have happened. Either there are more mothers who are not in a position to take care of their babies, or social services are getting better at seeing who those people are. What do the figures tell us about that?
I mean, I think the figures don't tell us what's behind it, and that's an important point, really. We need to do more to look behind and see what's going on. But I think there's generally a rise in children coming into care, but what we're seeing is a disproportionate rise of infants coming in, and this is the first time that any statistics have actually looked at removals at birth.
So do you want to pick up on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I agree with what Karen said, but I think what we're seeing also is the fact that there's a requirement now, before a child is removed into care, that all the information is in place up front before that point. And so I think there is some indication that these are women who, 50% of the women that Karen's research looks at will have had children removed before. So a lot of that information will already be there. And what we see is that when the women come back in again, pregnant, that their circumstances have often not changed at all.
And I know you're working with those women to try and change those circumstances, but you yourself became involved in this because you saw this pattern yourself. You were having to remove babies. So when does a child get taken away from its mother? And you talk about infants. Is it within days, or what happens?
Well, I mean, I think it's complex, a number of reasons why a child is removed, but certainly from my experience and the children we've removed, and actually working with the women we are now, although I think that there's not enough done to focus on that woman and their needs, actually, I don't think the wrong decisions were made about the child being removed.
Right.
And it obviously depends on the circumstances, but for a child, the better outcome is going to be if they are in a placement as soon as possible and a permanent arrangement found. So if you have the information available and it's clear that they are unlikely to be able to care for that child, it is very important that that is done for the child as swiftly as possible. However, if you don't put something in and focus on these women and actually begin to help support them, because they are very vulnerable, they are vulnerable adults that need support.
So just to be clear, because we're going to be speaking to Nicky Morgan, Secretary of State for Education, later. What you're saying is that if someone has appeared in the system a mother who's had their child taken away, they're effectively walking out of hospital and no one's following up on their life and what's happening. Is that what you say? Is that where the intervention needs to come in?
I think that's where the intervention, that's certainly where intervention like pause is what we do, is we step in at that point. And our focus is on the woman, because what happens when a child is removed, clearly and rightly, the focus needs to be on that child from social workers. But these women are not easy to engage, and they find engaging hard. So there are services out there. I don't think we should get that wrong. There are drugs and alcohol services, mental health services. But what you need is outreach, and you need a programme that does it differently, that goes there, find those women, because they disappear and they disengage from those services.
Karen, and the other thing that is obvious from the research is they disappear for a while until they then often go on to have another child. And there are some cases in your research when they carry on for as many as 10 children being taken away. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, given the data that we have, it's difficult to see quite how many babies women do eventually go on to have. But what we can say is they certainly come back very quickly, having had a child removed. And if we compare that to women who've had a baby, you know, a baby being stillborn, they also get pregnant again quite quickly. So as Sophie's saying, there is something here about loss and the trauma of removal that may be a factor in this rapid repeat pattern that we're seeing. But certainly, I mean, I'd agree with Sophie that unless we address this issue and help women at the point of removal, then we're going to continue to see this pattern. And women could go on to have multiple babies removed.
We will be discussing this more a little later on. Thank you both very much for your time this morning.
Thank you. 17 minutes